Transmigrated into a school idol and forced to do business, Bai Zhou transmigrated into a book. The talented protagonist was the top student in school. Due to his excellence in every subject, many people were dissatisfied with him, so they devised various schemes to mess with him, to the extent that they left a dark shadow on his high school years. However, the villains did not know that the seemingly poor protagonist was actually the eldest son of the richest man in City A. And in 6 years, the protagonist would replace his father's position as the new richest man in City A with his own capabilities. 10 years later, he would become the youngest and richest man in the country. When that happens, the villains would be tortured to death by the protagonist. As bad luck would have it, Bai Zhou transmigrated into the villain that bullied the protagonist the most. In order to live for a few more years, Bai Zhou, the villain, begins to formulate a character correction plan. However, just as he is struggling to save his image in the eyes of the protagonist, out of the blue, the protagonist anxiously pushes him against the wall and traps him within the circle of his arms. Those refined brown eyes watch him attentively. Bai Zhou, if you make trouble again, I will kiss you. Bai Zhou, who was just habit and ed, panics. Can someone tell me exactly where did I go wrong? Sif Chapter 1. Confused man in history. When Bai Zhou opened his eyes again, the scene in front of him had completely changed. In an empty and amused classroom, a few students who were dressed in school uniform enclosed a male student. The boy in the middle had his head lowered, and his face could not be seen clearly. Bai Zhou looked at the unfamiliar scene in front of him and wanted to speak, but accidentally choked on the smoke in his mouth. Only then did he find that he was holding a cigarette in his mouth, and was also sitting very much like a big boss. Bai Zhou was a little stunned. What had happened? He clearly remembered getting hit by a car when he was on his way to volunteer. How could he have appeared here now? And where was this place? A voice appeared in his mind. Welcome to the world within a book. You can call me 008. Bai Zhou was a little confused. The world within a book? I transmigrated into a book. 008. Yes, host. I am your portable system, 008. Bai Zhou took a couple seconds to react. He had read a few novels about characters transmigrating into books, but this was the first time he had experienced transmigration himself. He asked 008 about the novel story, but 008 only told him that it was a feel-good story. He took a few seconds to calm down, maintaining a hint of reason. So, based on how things usually go, I have to complete the tasks you assigned to me? 008. No, there are no tasks. Here, you can use the information you have to do whenever you want. Bai Zhou was puzzled. He felt that he had too much freedom, so he asked, then what was the purpose of me transmigrating? 008. To live start. To live asterisk? This wording. Not knowing why, Bai Zhou had a not-so-good hunch that his future would be full of hardships. 008. I will begin to import the novel's information. The following plot can be yours to freely explore. If you have any questions, you can call on me in your mind at any time. As soon as the voice of 008 ended, the book's information entered Bai Zhou's mind, and everything became clearer. He had transmigrated into a feel-good story and became a powerful boss of the school campus. Moreover, he was also the school brass asterisk, sought after by many girls in the school. T/N, most handsome boy in school idol. Bai Zhou slapped his face. For the first time, he found that maybe his hunch could be inaccurate. For this type of character in a cool story, the future should not be full of hardships. Bai Zhou, male, 18-year-old, grade 2 student in high school, class 5. Since he was a child, he had been attending international schools and would study all year round. He was proficient in 5 languages and was talented at painting, along with anything art-related. 1 hour before the lunch break, the original Bai Zhou, the boss of the campus, had ordered a passerby to give him yesterday's homework. However, the passerby had completely ignored him, which left the original host in a displeased mood. Due to this, he had his little brothers asterisk kidnap the passerby into an empty classroom and planned to give him a beating. T/N, brothers as his underlings / followers, not blood related. Then, just before the beating began, he had transmigrated it. Bai Zhou had a cigarette in his mouth and was sitting on a chair with his legs sticking up. In front of him was the student who, half an hour ago, was kidnapped and tied up by the little brothers, the passerby that. Hold on, who is this passerby? Bai Zhou asked 008. 008, novel's information is being imported. 008, I-oh, damn it, it got jammed. Bai Zhou. 008 explained that due to the huge amount of information in the novel, along with the aging of their equipment, the imported information often got stuck or was processed slowly. But generally speaking, for any novel, even with a high word count, everything should be imported completely within 3 to 5 days. Bai Zhou smiled and suggested that their equipment should be replaced. The information was not fully processed, so Bai Zhou had no choice but to observe the passerby in front of him with his own judgment. The student had slightly curly black hair, and with his head half lowered, his bangs had almost covered most of his face, so people were unable to see his appearance clearly. Although he sat on a stool, it was obvious that the passerby was tall, close to 190 centimeters, and that his body was not as thin as the average high school student. If his looks were quite good, he would be the type of boy that would be a hit among schoolgirls. Bai Zhou looked at the person in front of him. Normally, ordinary people who knew they were going to be given a thrashing would be scared, and even asking for mercy wouldn't be unusual. However, this passerby did not lose composure. There was absolutely no impression that he was about to get beaten up. Weirdly enough, Bai Zhou did not see any trace of panic on the student's body, but rather a calmness that was different from his peers. Little brother number 1 spoke up from the side. Boss, if we don't teach this kid properly today, then he would be very disruptive in the future. Little brother number 2 echoed, that's right. Relying on the image of a studious student, I've been fed up with him for some time. It turned out the passerby was called Tian, and that he was a study tyrant. Little brother number 3 exaggeratedly raised the baseball bat in his hand. Boss, as long as you give the order, we will immediately start. Bai Zhou glanced at the baseball bat held by little brother number 3 and panicked for a moment before calming down, then ordered, untie him. The group of little brothers, they obviously did not understand how their boss might work. Privacy settings. Seeing that the little brothers did not move, Bai Zhou jumped out of his chair and walked in front of Tian to personally untie him. Although it felt really impressive to be a boss on campus, Bai Zhou had not arrived at the point where he was desperate enough to resort to bullying people who were weaker than himself to establish his cool image. Moreover, he felt that this person should take up an important role in the book. Bai Zhou untied the loose ropes one by one, thinking that it was a bit inappropriate to provoke someone and then immediately let them go, so he considered sincerely apologizing to the person in front of him. Although it was the original host who was in the wrong, it was he who was controlling his body now and in the future, so he should be responsible for the mistakes made by the original owner. Bai Zhou was about to apologize and raised his eyes to the person in front of him, but was instantly deterred. His words were stuck in his throat. The dark eyes that were covered by bangs were short while held a bit of anger. The temperature around him seemed to be several degrees lower. Bai Zhou looked at the rope that the boy had been untied from. The student's distinct fingers picked up the black-framed glasses that were thrown on the ground. Without a word, he walked out the door. It wasn't until the man's back was out of his sight that Bai Zhou recovered. What was wrong with this person? Too horrifying. Unlike the cold chill of a winter night, the summer afternoon was hot and the breeze passing by the lake was refreshingly cool. The high school that the original host attended was a very famous, distinguished school in a city. The ones who could enter the school were either the children of celebrities that lived around the area or talented students who were specially recruited. The original belonged to the former, abysmal grades, but had money and power at home. With the available information, Bai Zhou took his little brothers with him to the third-grade school building. There was a distance between the teacher's office and the teacher's area. When passing by the teacher's office, Bai Zhou heard the conversation of two teachers in the office. A female teacher had mentioned him. That Bai Zhou in our class, you know in BA? All day, he never studies, and only knows how to fight. Not only is he poor with bookwork, but he also has such a horrible personality. So hard to handle. I'm about to die from anger every day. Privacy settings. Be more quiet. What if a student passes by and hears you? How could there be students passing by at this time? They are all on the other side of the campus. As soon as I talk about that kid, I feel like exploding. There's nothing we can do about it all. He's the little master that everyone adores. Little master? He does nothing but lag behind with his achievements, and is an insect who only eats the food at home. This kind of person is simply garbage in my class. Hearing the female teacher's words, Tu Gaoming hissed, damn it, Chang Jiahui must be tired of living BA. Hearing his boss being insulted like this, Tu Gaoming's lungs were going to blow up. Tu Gaoming was about to storm in and hand Chang Jiahui a verbal essay when Bai Zhou stretched out a hand quietly and pulled him back into place, shaking his head. Tu Gaoming looked at him, puzzled. Boss? Bai Zhou raised a finger to his lips, signaling for him to be quiet. The people inside continued. The male teacher said, although this may be the case, you are still a teacher. Don't be unpleasant when you talk. Children these days are unavoidably rebellious during adolescence. Bear with it and it'll be over sooner or later. Don't keep worrying about this matter and relieve your headaches earlier, BA. Bear with it? The average grade of class 5 would have gone up, but instead, it was dragged down by such useless garbage. How could you think I could bear with it? What's the use of painting well and singing well? Attending or not attending culture classes, it all makes the same difference. Lagging behind all day long, I really want to kick him into the lower class as soon as I can. Tu Gaoming clenched his fists and whispered to Bai Zhou, Boss, just say one word and I'll go in to clean her up. Bai Zhou thought for a while, then patted him on the shoulder. Come, let's go back to the classroom. After speaking, he turned and walked away. Tu Gaoming had been outraged while listening to the teacher, but since his boss didn't say anything, he had to endure it. He rushed to catch up, followed by the other little brothers. Chang Jiahui, the teacher Bai Zhou knew, was famous for her poisonous tongue. Behind the students' backs, she often said that she looked down on the ones who had gotten it due to their family's connections. In fact, she had also received her position through connections, and the people backing her up weren't small. Just because she had taught a few good students some years back, her ego had inflated to the point of flying. In the book, Chang Jiahui and the original host were constantly at heads with each other. Privacy settings. One of the reasons was because the original host was poor at learning. Chang Jiahui loved to have face and did not want to have low-quality students in her class, but the original host was simply a guy who sucked at studying. Actually, the original owner had also tried to study well, but due to an inadequate foundation, as well as the fact that he was repeatedly berated by Chang Jiahui, there had been no results to show for his efforts. Later on, he and his brothers voluntarily abandoned themselves, no longer wanting to struggle through their attempts. They were content to be boys who did whatever they wanted. But the deeper reason was the personal problem between Chang Jiahui and the original host. In the past, Chang Jiahui's son had been mixed with the original. Later, when he went out to fight, he had accidentally injured his leg. Because of this incident, Chang Jiahui always resented the original, thinking that it was he who had harmed her son. In fact, because the original owner had been reprimanded by Chang Jiahui, he didn't agree when her son asked to participate in the fight and made the latter promise that he wouldn't attend. However, on the day of the fight, Chang Jiahui's son went against his words and snuck out to the fight without telling the original owner. He was caught by his opponent, beaten up fiercely, and sent to the hospital. Chang Jiahui didn't understand what had happened, but it was a fact that her son had been injured and had also missed an important math competition due to being hospitalized. Therefore, she ignored any explanations from the original owner and decided that it was the original's fault. The fight had ruined her son's future, and she wouldn't let the other side defend himself, so later, the original owner simply didn't bother to explain. This was how the two came to be in conflict. The bell for the beginning of class rang. Bai Zhou found his seat based on the information from the book, while Tu Gaoming and the other little brothers returned to their seats one after another. The first period was Chang Jiahui's class. After a while, Chang Jiahui came in with the teaching materials. Bai Zhou looked at the smiling face on the podium with some irony, and couldn't help but shake his head. Before we begin today's class, let us briefly review yesterday's topic. I will choose a few students to come up to be tested. If you want, you can come up here by yourself. I'll start writing the question on the blackboard now. If there are any students who think that they can solve it, then come up and do so. For the remaining questions, I'll do a draw and have other students attempt them. Chang Jiahui picked up the chalk and began to write the questions on the blackboard. The blackboard was very large, divided up and down, then left and right. She quickly wrote up 2 math problems. Chang Jiahui had a habit when it came to writing up questions. The simple ones were in the front and the more difficult puzzles were at the end. Some students were afraid that they would be drawn to solve the more arduous puzzles that their classmates had not attempted, so they would rush up one after the other to do the ones they knew. 6 questions were swiftly put up onto the blackboard. The first 5 questions occupied 3 small blackboards, and the last question alone had taken up an entire small blackboard. All the students who were familiar with Zhang Jiaowei's routine knew at a glance that the final question that took up an entire blackboard must be complicated. Privacy settings. The first 5 were soon answered, but no one dared to touch the last. Below the blackboard, the students whispered to each other. I have never seen the last one. Were we even taught this type of question previously, BA? This one is absolutely not a review question at all, BA. It's clearly put up to make things difficult for us. Shit, who can even do this last one? Why have I never seen the symbols in this question? I've seen this question before. It's a high-level question in the university entrance examination papers of a prestigious school. So far, only a few people have been able to solve it. Are you crazy? Such a difficult question. Did I enter the wrong room? This can only be answered by the class for top students, BA. While the children were discussing, Zhang Jiaowei looked at the class in a relaxed manner. Why? Can no one solve this question? If there is no one, I will draw a name. It's over, it's over. Please, don't let me be selected. Me too, I don't want to be punished in public. As expected of poisonous tongue chick, whoever is called up must be damn unlucky. If you can't do it, you will be punished with 3 consecutive days of cleaning. I don't want to clean anymore. Zhang Jiaowei glanced down from the podium and saw rows of students that had their heads down, all fearing for their lives. It looked like she was happily tapping the lecture podium with her fingers, examining row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, and finally stopping on the desk second row from the back, right next to the wall. She lifted her chin slightly, gaze fixed on Bai Zhou, who was looking down at his table. Clasping her hands together and narrowing her eyes, she said, This question. Let Bai Zhou come up and do it.